You're listening to the Really Useful Podcast with a tech podcast for technophobes. I'll be honest, I just did a little air dance to that. My name's Christian Corley. That you hear cackling is Gavin Phillips. This is a really useful podcast from MakeUseOf.com. We're here to help guide you through technology. This isn't a tech podcast for techies. It's a tech podcast for the average Joe or Jill. It's the tech podcast for technophobes. And this week we are looking at, buying consoles, because there's, whether or not there's a sale on or there's a new console imminent, but buying consoles is not as straightforward a job as you might think it is. Now, as we record this, it is November 2020, and we are awaiting the arrival of the PS5, aren't we, Gavin?
It is. It's right on the cusp of delivery. In the next few days, it's going to be hitting the shelves in all the major retailers.
That's right. Now, currently it's sold out in all the major retailers, so only people with pre-orders at this stage. It might change later on today, it might change in a few days' time, because usually what happens when they're quote-unquote sold out, they manage to find a few thousand units for the actual day. But, we'll see how, or the day after, but we'll see how it turns out. Regardless, obviously it's been slight logistic issues in 2020, so that might not be the case this time around. The current status of consoles is interesting, isn't it? Because with the PS5 and the Xbox One X, or the Xbox X... Right, we'll start there. What is the new Xbox called?
The new Xbox is the Xbox Series X.
Series X, that's it, yes.
They
haven't done a great job, Microsoft. They're usually pretty good when it comes to the Xbox with naming and keeping things very straightforward, but with this new Xbox and the secondary and tertiary versions of the Xbox One, there's been a bit of confusion over the naming, hasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely, because there's also the secondary Xbox, which is the Xbox Series S, which is like the smaller sibling to the main Xbox Series X. So the Series S is going to come with slightly less great specs than the main Series X, but it's still expected to run games very, very high quality, 1440p, which is like the next size up from your standard 1080p television at a very, very high frame rate. So still really, really good quality.
So, as I say, we're at this strange point where we're in a transition between current gen and next gen, aren't we? So we've got the Xbox and we've got the we've got the Xbox One and we've got the PS4, and we're moving on to the Xbox Series X and the PS5, and then in the background we've still got Nintendo using previous gen tech, but with beautiful results in terms of playability and gameplay and fun and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, the connectivity you get from the Nintendo Switch, I think, is almost unparalleled, isn't it? You could walk up to anybody on the street and play a game with them as long as they've got the same game. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, nothing else does that. And then you've also got this other kind of there's a kind of a substrata of consoles where you've got the retro revival consoles, and you've got the new Atari VCS console, which is kind of like a Linux console. With some games built into it, classic Atari games and updates, and a whole online store ready for buyers to tap into. So buying a console is probably as difficult now as it's ever been, isn't it? With so much choice.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, when you've got so much choice, you're actually having to sift through quite a lot of information to get to figure out which platform is going to suit you best. There's not that initial straight up feeling of, because I had a PS4, I will now have a PS5, because you're not sure of backwards compatibility, if your controllers are going to work, if all your other peripherals are going to carry over and all that sort of stuff. So if you spent money on one platform, you obviously do want to continue with it, but it might not always be the case.
What is the backwards compatibility scenario with the PS5, since that's the first one that's coming along? Would I be able to play a PS4 game on a PS5?
Yeah, so there's actually only a very small list of PS4 games that won't work with the PS5. I think there's 10 or 12 games that aren't going to make the jump. The rest of them, you'll be able to put all of your discs straight up into the PS5 and they will work. The other thing with the PS5 is you've also got PlayStation, what was it? PlayStation Now, which is Sony's online game streaming service, and that will give you access to, I think, 500 or 600 different games, maybe even more from the PS3 and the PS2 era, and they will all work on the PlayStation 5. But the only downside to it is you don't necessarily get the power of the PS5 in those games. They won't have their frame rate unlocked, so it won't look as majestic as a PlayStation 5 game, as you would expect. You know, if you're playing a PlayStation 2 game, that's now 2003, like quite old in terms of gaming technology. So you're not going to see a massive uptick in quality, but at least you'll be able to play it on your new console.
I think in terms of games that are nearly 20 years old, from the same, that are designed for the same platform or a previous version of that platform, there is the whole retro gaming thing from sort of like post 2000. There is a kind of feeling, isn't there, that it should work, whether it does or not. As often in the case with the Xbox, you can play original Xbox games through Xbox Live or whatever its current name is, and the same with Xbox 360 games. But you know, when it comes to computer games, it's another matter entirely. If you're on a desktop computer or a laptop and you want to play a game from 1990 or even from 2000, you're looking at a very different operating system. And although the hardware that you've got has absolutely no problem running the game, there are various things in your way, and it all gets a bit messy, which is why I think the console option for gaming with old titles is it's a lot more streamlined and safe, isn't it? I mean, it's either play on the current gen or just head along to a thrift store and buy an old console, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, as you're kind of alluding to there, as with a PC, you are kind of blessed with options as well. So, like you say, if you want to fire up a game from 1990 on your PC, there's any number of ways you can do that.
Absolutely, but it's not clean cut though, is it? It's not a case of just like bang it on and it runs. You've got to do a bit of messing around. You maybe install the DOS box to run all DOS games, or run Windows 95 or 98 in a virtual machine, or any of those things.
Yeah.
So console gaming. I've always had a kind of love-hate relationship with console gaming. Really until I got the Xbox One. Prior to that, I was running into problems with consoles. Either not being as flexible as I wanted them to be, or finding that actually the PC hardware had improved since I bought the consoles. I went back to the PC games and all that sort of thing. As we approach a new generation, do you think that is that still a problem? Do you think?
I think.
Is it a bigger problem now?
Sorry?
Could it be a bigger problem now?
Well, I think there's always an issue when you compare consoles to PC gaming. PC gaming is always going to have, for me at least, an inherent advantage in that if a new graphics card comes out, you can upgrade your PC. So we've just had the release of a load of new NVIDIA and AMD graphics cards, and they all look fantastic. If you bought into the PlayStation 5 or whatever, you're guaranteed a level of quality, absolutely. But as you get towards the end of that generation, does the quality then start to drop off, especially in comparison to the latest developments in the PC world?
Yeah.
So the GPUs in the PlayStation 5, for example, are based upon some of the latest AMD graphics cards that you would find in a PC. But as generation between consoles is getting longer and longer, really, those generational steps do sort of feel like they're getting smaller.
Okay, I'll hit this button here. Bear with me a sec. So, whether you're heading into Christmas or birthday, or you've spotted a sale on Amazon or any of those things, there's a very good chance that you're thinking, am I going to treat myself or my loved one to a console. Now, we obviously can't tell you which one to buy. However, we can help you choose which ones to buy. Many people just look at Xbox and PlayStation in particular and think, there's a games console, I'll buy it. But there is more to it than that, isn't there?
I think there definitely is a little bit more nuance to it. I think. I guess one of the things, especially if you're going in early, is you want to know what games you can get
Yeah.
at the start. So what games is the PS5 going to launch with? And you're looking at things like God of War, Bloodborne, and things like that. And you got to weigh it up with the Xbox release games, which all of them are escaping my memory at the moment. But you want to figure out when you open that box. So say you manage to get one between now and Christmas, you open it up on Christmas Day. What games are you going to be giving your family or loved one to play on that day? So which suits them? And have you got older games that you want to continue playing? If you've got saved games, they can move over to the new console and continue playing them anyway.
I think launch games are important, aren't they? But also exclusives.
Yeah, things like your Gran Turismos, which for many is a fantastic racing game, but it's a massive seller on the PS5 because it is one of the best, you know. So that's always a good shout. Have any games caught your eye?
Well, I'm kind of not so much for me. My son's like a big Spider-Man fan, so that's an obvious draw. I don't know if we're going to get a PS5 though, so I don't know. It's all up in the air at the moment which way we're going to go. So, but the Spider-Man thing is a big draw, and also there's the previous Spider-Man game as well, again, on the PS4. So, I mean, that might be the angle we go. But then at the same time, we've got the Stadia, call it a virtual games console, I suppose, because it's remote. It's hosted on a remote server that you connect to over the internet and through your TV or through your computer or even through a mobile device. And there's a ton of really good games coming out on there at the moment. Some exclusive or some launching on there alongside other platforms, and some that have been out for a while and moving on to Stadia. And I don't know, is there a chance that the old Spider-Man game might end up on Stadia? Don't know yet. So it's it's all up in the air. It's difficult to choose, and you know, 2 is difficult to choose enough. But when you've already got existing choices, and then you've got the Switch dangling in the background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as this, you think, I mean, we've got the prospect of Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up towards the end of this month, November. So you're going to inevitably see some deals for the previous generation, for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox Series 1. So if you're not desperate for like the latest and greatest in technology, and you still want to play brilliant games at a very, very, very high level of graphics and, you know, enjoyment, you can always just spring for one of these deals that are inevitably going to happen as retailers start discounting their old stock that they're going to want to start getting rid of to start getting the new stock in, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of prices, PS5 prices are known, and the Xbox One X, Xbox Series X, prices are known.
Yeah, so the PS5 is going to be $500 at release. And I think the Xbox Series X is about the same, if I'm not mistaken. There's also the digital edition of the PlayStation 5, which is, it comes with, it doesn't come with an optical drive, so you don't use any discs with it. It's purely download only, and that's either $50 cheaper, I think.
Right, okay.
And the actual console itself weighs half a kilo less and is slightly shorter. Because I don't know if you know this, the PlayStation 5 is a fairly large piece of machinery. It stands 390 millimeters high, so 39 centimeters, you know, which is pretty big for a console these days.
Yeah,
you know,
is, yeah.
the Xbox Series X in comparison,
it's a PC tower.
Yeah, it's massive. It's huge. It's humongous. And so the Xbox Series X is 301, which is, you know, still substantial, 30 centimeters, but, you know, nearly 40 centimeters. So it comes with its own stand as well. So you can have it the PlayStation 5 this is. You can have it freestanding.
Yeah.
But I've been reading some early reviews from people that have already got their hands on it, reviewers, and they said you can do that, but you absolutely shouldn't because it will fall over. It will topple over at some point.
So you got to lay it flat.
Well, you can lay it flat, or it comes with like an inbuilt extra stand, so you can stand it tall and proud if you want. But you shouldn't stand it up without the additional stand because
Sure.
it will fall over.
Fall over. Okay. One of the things that we've kind of danced around is the Nintendo Switch, and there's the main Nintendo Switch, and then there's the kind of, for want of a better phrase, the handheld Nintendo Switch, which doesn't have removable controllers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, I mean, when you've got a PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, or an Xbox Series X or an Xbox Series One, you kind of have this sort of supposition that it's very much a gamer's console, isn't it? And a lot of it is either single player games or online multiplayer rather than local multiplayer, and that whole world of family fun that you have with a Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of local multiplayer thing that I think anybody of a certain age, God, I sound like an old person now. Being young and getting around the console. But no, you're right. I do think a lot of that, because of the advent of online multiplayer, you don't necessarily need to have all your mates around to play on the same console at the same time. It's unnecessary. But there's a magic that you do get from doing that. And the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo consoles of the past, of course, are very, very much aware of this and very much still go for that, that you can be with someone playing the same game and very much in the moment together in the same room, which is really nice.
Yeah. Particularly the Wii. The Wii U, a little bit different, but particularly the Nintendo Wii, which is, sort of obviously one of the greatest consoles developed. I mean, the sales on it were mind-blowing at the time.
Yeah, but they've only just recently, haven't they, closed the Wii store? I think
Yes,
in
the
the last
years.
12 months or so.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that shows the longevity of that platform. And talking of the Nintendo Switch, some of the games on it have been some of the best games of the last 10, 15 years. Think of the last Zelda. Was it Breath of the Wild? Was an absolute smash hit. The Mario Kart 8. Absolutely fantastic. Super Smash Bros is always a good shout, and of course, like the the one with the animals, Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
You still see Twitter people asking if they've got the price of turnips. Turnips? I think it's turnips that they want. They want turnips. And so that still goes on. So despite the behemoths of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, the Nintendo Switch is still going really strong, and in many ways is probably more family friendly than the alternatives.
Yeah, we've talked about the Switch and the PS5. When we talked about the new Xbox, and in terms of its backwards compatibility as well, what's going on there? Because obviously with the I know using an Xbox One that I can play old games, so just multiplayer games that just spring to mind from Xbox 360 era, Xbox One era, Xbox original era. They're all available through Xbox Gold, and some of them are good multiplayers. There's a few good car games in there that you can gather around the TV with a controller each. Is that going to carry on into the Xbox Series X?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Xbox Series X, you can play all Xbox One generation games on the new console. So that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the Xbox Series X and the Series S will have compatibility with over 500 games from the 360 and 39 from the original Xbox lineup. There's not loads, but like we said earlier, like the Xbox now is quite ancient technology, the original Xbox. So being able to fire up 40 odd of these games on your new console is great. The one thing I will add, actually, which I didn't get to in the PS5 bit, is that there are some issues with PS5 controller compatibility. So the PS5 comes with all new dual sense controllers. They look really nice. They're really flash. They've got some nice features in, like responsive force feedback and whatnot. So they're really nice, but they will only work with PS5 games. You won't be able to use them with your PS4 games. And likewise, your DualShock 4 controllers, which you got with your PS4, will not work with PS5 games on the PS5 console.
Oh,
so you'll be able to put your PS4 game in, but you must use your PS5 controllers. So going back to the Xbox Series X, there's no controller restrictions for the Xbox platform. So your Xbox 360 and your Xbox One controllers will work with the new Xbox Series X console.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Pricing then for games. What's the difference there?
I think they're fairly similar, to be honest. As far as I can tell, the price of new console games, I mean, as almost an exclusive PC gamer, the price of console games seems very expensive to me. You don't get the same sort of epic deals as you do on the PC. I think, we've been sort of blessed and by Steam and those platforms competing with each other.
I basically buy one console game a year.
Yeah. And play it through to 110%.
Yeah, completely.
I think there's something in that, though. So I've got hundreds upon hundreds of games that I've never played. And, probably hundreds more that I've played 5% of.
Yeah.
Because there's always something new and shiny to play that costs, like £5, $5. You don't, you do still get the enjoyment, but you don't feel the compulsion to sit and play for hours and make sure you get through every single bit. Now, I know some of our colleagues do. Ben Stegner, who comes on the podcast with you, is a real stickler for getting to 100% in his games. So some people do still do that, but I think it's becoming less and less.
I have played some lovely games on Steam that I've got through chance on a humble bundle or whatever, and I've ended up playing them for hours and hours and hours, and paid very little for them simply because they were very good games. On the other hand, I've bought console games and absolutely hated them.
Yes,
it's a really difficult balance to get right. And if you've $60, I don't. Is that what they are? $60 in the US? I mean, they're like £50-60 in the UK.
Yes, so $60.
Yeah, that's a lot of money to pay if you're not going to be happy with it. And sure, you can probably sell it on if you're not keen on the game, but you're still not going to get your original outlay back.
No, absolutely. Especially as more and more game stores are sort of closing down, physical game stores, I mean.
Yeah.
Being forced into online sales. So the secondary resale market for digital games is obviously zero because you can't do it because it's tied to your name, account, console, etc. So it's not like the harking back to the good old days again where you go down and sell your games at the market or whatever. So you just don't really do that anymore.
No, very rare unless you've got old gen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Retro,
so there's another plus for old gen game, and you can pick them up for pennies really these days, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is a whole different conversation that we're not going to get into, otherwise we're going to run over time. I spend way too long on eBay looking at old games consoles, but we'll leave it there. Okay, and how does the price of a Nintendo Switch game compare with PS5 or Xbox?
So the Nintendo Switch games, they have decreased slightly in price, but considering now the Switch has been around for a few years, the first-party titles especially still cost quite a bit. I don't know the exact price, but I know they're not cheap. They're cheaper than PS5 and Xbox, but they're not cheap. But there's quite a decent indie scene with the Nintendo Switch. Like you were saying, with the humble bundle games, you might find a few gems that are a bit cheaper, games that you really like playing. And you will find Nintendo Switch games in your local game store. You know, you can get secondhand games, so it is worth always checking out your local game shop.
Nintendo Switch as well, you kind of feel that maybe paying $50, $60 for a fun for all the family game isn't a massive problem compared to paying that for a game that you're going to be playing on your own.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. There's definitely something about an outlay for all the family, isn't there?
Yeah.
You can justify it.
Yeah, it's like a day out, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, a rainy day where you're stuck indoors for 8 hours or whatever, and you've got a solid 8 hours of entertainment.
Totally,
so.
Yeah. So we've looked at the Xbox Series X, the PS5, and Nintendo Switch, and a few of the other things that are dancing around in the background. The Atari VCS probably is the one other thing that's going to make some noise over the coming year or so of the first stage of the next generation. But it's a very different proposition hardware wise. It's more like a PC than anything else. So that's really kind of a retro focused thing with a heavy Atari flavor. So you'd probably avoid that in many cases unless retro and Atari are very much your thing. And you've also got the Google Stadia option, which of the streaming solutions, and we did a podcast about streaming, which we'll link you to in the show notes about game streaming. The Stadia is very much feels the one that is most like a console out of all the streaming platforms, whereas the others are more PC gaming related.
Yeah.
Outside of the Microsoft's environment. If I'm going to put you on the spot now, which one are you going to buy?
I would probably go for the Xbox Series X. I've always been more of an Xbox gamer since switching over from the PS2 way back in the day. The Xbox Series X does just nudge it in terms of specs. Slightly better CPU, slightly better GPU. I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with whatever console they buy this time around. They're very similar in terms of their specs and output. And whatever happens, there's going to be fantastic games on both platforms. So don't get drawn into the PlayStation versus Xbox fanboy and girl battles, because it's just not worth it. But they're both going to be brilliant platforms.
Yeah, that's always something that happens, and always something that can sway you one way or the other when it probably shouldn't, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not worth it, you know. And you know, if you feel desperate that you want to get the alternative platform, if you buy one, you can wait until towards the end of the console generation, and pick one up a lot cheaper. Or there's always going to be someone on the other side that wishes they'd bought the opposite console as well. You can find someone to swap with, try it out, what have you. And the other thing is just wait for the reviews of games, wait for benchmarking reviews, and wait to see how the games that you actually really, really want to play on these platforms, how they actually look and stand up to your expectations in reviews. You know, it's all very well and good rushing out. Like we said at the very beginning of the podcast, like both of these consoles are completely sold out. There may well be a small glut of new consoles hitting the market around Black Friday, and I imagine the manufacturers are desperately trying to do that. But they're going to be snapped up in an instant as well, and anything that comes between now and, you know, Christmas and onwards. So if you've got time to wait and time to spare, just look at reviews and figure out what's going to suit you best, because each platform's got its own back end as well, hasn't it? You know, the media side of it, what can you stream on it, you know, what apps does the actual console have, and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
Just take your time.
An important consideration. And I mean, in terms of reviews, check our guide to online reviews, our previous podcast on interpreting online reviews and making sure that you're not being conned by them. for some extra help there. For me, I think I may go towards the PS5 at the moment. It's changed in just half an hour. I'm now erring towards one, and I'll veer away from it again later on, no doubt. And one of the things I'm thinking about here is the fact that Red Dead Redemption ended up on the PC, Red Dead Redemption 2. So I'm kind of, in one hand, I'm loath to actually go with a new console, and on the other hand, maybe I want to go for one where the game is almost never going to appear on any other platform. In which case, I'll be veering back towards the PS5. Whatever, who knows? Hopefully, we've helped you. Oh God, I do hope we've helped you make your mind up about which console you're going to buy, or at least clarify everything, get rid of the nonsense that hangs around these consoles, and guide you towards identifying the best device for you and your family. That brings us to the end of this week's really useful podcast with me, Christian Corley, and him, Gavin Phillips from MakeUseOf.com. This is the tech podcast for technophobes. Share us as widely as you can. Make sure that if there's anything that we shared with you that you think that your friends and relatives may benefit from, then you'll find us on all the big podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon as well, and everywhere else that you find podcasts. Until next time, it's goodbye from us.
Bye.